In the enchanted realm of powdered wigs, the British royal family has buried secrets far juicier than mere royal gossip. These captivating tales never grace the pages of textbooks. Picture ghostly carriages, scandalous romances, royal undergarments, and a queen whose power was as plastic as Tupperware. Forget the crown jewels. It's time to uncover the truly bizarre and astonishing accounts from behind the grandeur of the throne. After all, with a family tree sprawling over 1,000 years, oddities are bound to arise. Here are 33 incredible yet true stories from the British royalty that will boggle your mind. But first, take a moment to subscribe, especially if you savor history with a quirky twist. We would love to know where you are tuning in from and, just for fun, what time it is in your part of the world. Is it midnight, a sneaky lunch break binge? We are all ears. Now, let's leap into the chaos. Our first tale centers on Queen Elizabeth I and her unlikely obsession with makeup. Few historical figures are as instantly recognizable as she, adorned with ghostly pale skin and a striking hairstyle, her lips painted in shades of deep red. Yet, beneath this polished exterior lay a haunting secret that transcended all political drama. She was sacrificing her health in the name of beauty. Elizabeth's preferred cosmetic, Venetian ceruse, was a toxic blend of vinegar and white lead, the very substance modern guides warn us to avoid like the plague. In the 1500s, this concoction was applied liberally to create a flawless, pale complexion, a symbol of nobility and status that starkly contrasted the tanned skin of Laboris. To display a face as white as parchment communicated one's wealth and leisure, proclaiming that they lived above the toil of the common folk. However, this pursuit of the ideal turned into a tragic fixation. After contracting smallpox in 1562, Elizabeth was left scarred, and her reliance on the deadly makeup only deepened. Layers of the toxic paint thickened to mask her humanity and the inherent mortality of a queen meant to embody divinity. As time marched on, the very substance that upheld her facade began to consume her. The lead infiltrated her skin, causing unsightly cracks, hair loss, and darkened teeth, turning her beauty into a monstrous illusion. Yet, no one dared speak up. After all, skincare tips were hardly on the agenda for the Virgin Queen. Curiously, Venetian ceruse was so caustic that it caused burns, prompting women, including Elizabeth, to further layer on this hazardous concoction, a futile effort akin to covering a crumbling wall with fresh paint, ensuring the cracks would always return. Some historians speculate that Elizabeth's later health struggles, a mix of fatigue, insomnia, and erratic emotions, might point to lead poisoning, fueled not just by her paint but also by the toxic blushes and powders she used. Yet in the court, she remained untouchable, both in stature and influence. By the time of her passing in 1603, Elizabeth was nearly bald beneath her elaborate wigs, her teeth a shadow of their former selves, her fingers shaking. In her final days, she famously declined to keep mirrors in her chambers, leaving one to wonder whether it was vanity or sheer terror that compelled her. Despite the decay beneath the surface, her image, pale, imposing, defying the passage of time, became iconic, as if death had donned rouge in rebellion against the natural order. Elizabeth I's tale, however, is but one of many in a kingdom rife with eccentricity. As she slowly poisoned herself with beauty, another royal story of betrayal unfolded in a much more vibrant manner. 2. The tale of King George III and his blue urine. Picture this: the late 1700s. The British monarch, King George III, stands beneath a tree, speaking to it not in metaphor, but in earnest conversation, treating it as if it were the King of Prussia. With polite gestures and eloquent language, he enacts this peculiar diplomatic exchange, while his royal advisers choose to ignore this unusual display. Monarchs, after all, often dance on the line of eccentric and, in George's case, dangerously unwell. The king's infamous madness has transcended time, passed down as a tale of tragedy or satire. Yet among the powdered wigs and hushed speculations lies an unexpected revelation buried in the annals of history. His urine was blue. Yes, you heard me right, blue. The cause? A rare metabolic condition known as phyria, which affects the production of heme, vital for hemoglobin function. Symptoms ranged from severe confusion to paranoia, and even a striking azure tint to bodily fluids, reminiscent of a bizarre Renaissance sports drink. Struck with bewilderment, the medical professionals of the 18th century were ill-equipped to understand his affliction, resorting to bloodletting and hopeful prayers instead of effective treatment. Yet, this blue discoloration continuously intrigued observers. Was it phyria or a response to the vast quantities of medication prescribed? One theory proposed a plant-based remedy meant to soothe George's nerves may have caused his urine's peculiar hue. Others dismissed the idea as mere psychological antics, whether from loyalists or critics, depending on their political leanings. But what's truly astonishing is this: amidst his struggles with reality, George III continued to govern his empire. During his episodes, he penned letters tirelessly, raving, insightful, and profoundly intense, producing pages upon pages of sprawling royal handwriting. Once, he famously crafted an entire 400-word sentence. And in moments of clarity, he vividly recalled his erratic statements and actions, perhaps envisioning the horror of awakening from a feverish dream only to remember addressing an oak tree or engaging in spirited debate with a butler's dog. It's no surprise the court became increasingly uneasy, as the thin boundary separating regal eccentricity from mental breakdown had become alarmingly blurred. Britain, however, preferred to uphold a facade of infallible royalty, uncomfortable with the human condition revealing itself beneath the royal veneer. The sight of blue urine became emblematic, a stark representation of monarchy's hidden flaws, a private issue made glaringly public. The empire clad its rulers in gilded majesty, while beneath it all lay a fragile human form deteriorating both physically and mentally. By the end of his reign, George III found himself blind, incoherent, and largely forgotten, a mere spectre within his own palace, far removed from the court that once surrounded him. Yet, as George faded into solitude, another royal would emerge a century and a half later, embracing her own challenges with exuberance, armed with pearls, gin, and a splash of mischief. And with just 2 narratives down, we've uncovered lead poisoning and royal blue pea, a mere glimpse into a world far stranger than fiction. If you're intrigued, remember to subscribe to delve deeper into royal oddities. And tell us, where are you listening from right now? Are you cozied up in bed, commuting on the train, or perhaps sneaking in a listen at work? Share your location in the comments, for we find time zones utterly captivating. In the captivating world of royalty, Princess Margaret emerges as a vivid contrast to her elder sister, Queen Elizabeth. While Elizabeth epitomized the stoic and dignified image of monarchy for 70 years, Margaret was the unrestrained spirit, the unpredictable heartbeat of the royal family. She was the one who indulged in excess, from smoking and drinking to charming the cameras. Remarkably, she even once rejected a king, valuing her freedom over the rich heaviness of a crown. The epitome of her lavish lifestyle was vividly displayed in her morning rituals. As whispers of her indulgent habits became legend, it was said that her day didn't truly kick off until around 11, when she emerged from her clouds of silk sheets to connect first with her mirror. With a cigarette in hand, she would oversee the meticulous styling of her gravity-defying bouffant, an iconic fashion statement that defied conventional norms and responsibilities. Then came her exquisite bathing routine, not just a quick rinse, but a grand ceremony in her bathtub, adorned with luxurious crystal bottles and fragrant oils, along with a perfectly crafted gin and tonic. The delicate sound of ice clinking and fresh citrus scents mingled with jazz, setting the scene for a moment steeped in lavishness and defiance. Margaret was not a mere drinker. She was a connoisseur of spirits, adhering to a unique etiquette: champagne before dinner, wine during, brandy or scotch afterward, and gin resonating consistently throughout her days. Yet, more than a tale of indulgence, her stories speak to a profound rebellion against the societal confines of her royal upbringing. While she lived in the shadow of a sister whose rule extended over an empire, Margaret discovered her own way to shine, through cool nonchalance and audacious flair, turning every private affair into an exquisite spectacle. Though the press often depicted her as scandalous or spoiled, nothing seemed to unsettle her spectacular presence. Whether dazzling at soirees or vacuuming adorned with a tiara, she captivatingly blended playfulness with grace, embodying both diva and understudy in the royal drama. Behind the laughter and glamour lay a bittersweet awareness, a silent understanding that her gilded existence lacked a pre-written script. She took it upon herself to create a narrative filled with flair and intrigue. Ultimately, her greatest act was not simply rebellion, but crafting style as a means of survival, a glamorous resistance draped in elegance and layered with poignant rhythm. Yet, amid the glitz, another royal ventured a more extraordinary path, believing his touch could mend the world. In the heart of 17th century England, if you found yourself plagued by swollen lymph nodes and harboring the dark fear of divine abandonment, your gaze may have shifted not toward a physician, but rather to the regal figure of King Charles II. This was a monarch who professed to possess a remedy transcending the conventional realms of medicine or even scripture: the mystical ability of the royal touch. That's right, the notion that the King of England, through divine right and royal blood, held the power to heal ailments with a mere physical connection. The focus of this extraordinary claim was scrofula, a tuberculosis-like affliction wreaking havoc on the lymphatic system, deemed incurable in those times. Commonly dubbed the King's Evil, it was believed that the best course of action for swollen glands was an audience with the monarch himself, delivered with gentle grace, of course. This practice was not birthed anew by Charles II. Rather, it had roots deeply embedded in historical tradition, a clever political maneuver cloaked in miraculous underpinnings. Yet, Charles embraced this ancient rite as he sought to heal more than just physical ailments. He aimed to mend the fragile fabric of his realm. After all, he was no ordinary king. He was the king returned, a monarch re-emerging from the shadows of civil conflict and his father's execution. Charles recognized the monarchy's urgent need for splendid public relations. What better way to illustrate that kings were not merely aristocrats in extravagant costumes but rather divine agents? Thus, the grandeur of his healing ceremonies commenced. Long lines of subjects, many of them weary peasants who had traversed countless miles, stood anxious for their miracle, teetering on the brink of despair. In exchange for their hopes, they received a velvet brush and a coin marked with St. Michael's likeness, symbolizing a medieval token of faith rather than a tangible remedy. This token, which they held onto as a last grip on hope, did not grant them antibiotics, but rather a heartfelt prayer and a flicker of faith. If symptoms faded, it was considered divine approval of the king's blessing. If they persisted, perhaps the fault lay in their own unfaithfulness. During his reign, Charles II reportedly laid hands on over 90,000 individuals, an astounding number, indeed. Imagine this regal figure, adorned in lace attire, bestowing his touch on countless necks, almost akin to a soul healer in a vast congregation. At times, a prayer would escape his lips. At others, a well-practiced smile would suffice. Historians note that this ritual held no joy for the king. Nonetheless, He performed it with unwavering commitment because the prince had learned that appearances often carried weight over genuine effect. Did the royal touch truly possess healing power? Most historians would argue it did not, though some insisted they experienced miraculous recoveries, attributing them to spontaneous remission or the power of hope. At a time when the nation grappled with the aftermath of violence, disease, and chaos, the belief that the king could extend his hand to resolve their woes offered profound comfort. This act was less about the physical and more about a collective national healing, a reassuring balm for a beleaguered society. The essence of the royal touch was a deep-seated faith, not science nor medicine, but an unwavering belief in the monarchy, a hierarchy where the sovereign could cross the chasm of human suffering and alleviate pain with a mere stroke. History would later unveil the truth. Monarchs seldom worked miracles. Yet the yearning for guidance from above remains a firmly entrenched desire. As the march of medical progress advanced amid its harsh realities, one royal figure would audaciously defy it all, opting for sedated oblivion during the trials of childbirth. 5. The chloroform births of Queen Victoria. In the opulent drawing rooms of 19th-century Britain, where ladies fainted at the mere mention of legs, and discussions among doctors wrestled with whether women should endure pain as a moral virtue, one decision by Queen Victoria sent shockwaves that reverberated through society, jarring clergymen, igniting heated debates among medical professionals, and stirring whispers among the genteel behind their lace fans for generations. This was not a quest for an escape from her royal existence. Rather, Victoria chose to be anesthetized during childbirth on 2 occasions. Let's turn back time. In 1853, expecting her 8th child, the Queen was all too familiar with the agonies of labor. The royal birthing suite, however lavish and staffed with the most skilled practitioners in the empire, could not provide what she truly needed. It wasn't a lack of means, but rather a lack of willingness to alleviate her suffering. Pain during childbirth was thought to be a virtue built into the fabric of existence. It echoed the biblical truth, "In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children." Naturally, discomfort made doctors anxious and shocked clergy. Yes, anesthetics existed. Chloroform had been utilized in surgeries for years but was taboo for laboring women. The belief that pain was God's design made the concept of painless childbirth seem both unholy and a disruption of divine order. Women were expected to endure their suffering with silent dignity. Queen Victoria, however, wasn't inclined to accept this notion of spiritual torment. Enter Dr. John Snow, a groundbreaking anesthetist who assured the Queen's confidence of chloroform's efficacy and safety. Risks were clear, precise dosages were crucial, and public backlash could be severe. Yet, Victoria had a history of quietly challenging conventions, particularly regarding her health. When it was time to welcome Prince Leopold, she inhaled the anesthetic, drifting into a pain-free state, awakening to the miracle of birth without any cries of agony. And instantly, a long-standing taboo began to shatter. Newspapers, constrained by royal secrecy, could not reveal much, but whispers of the Queen's bold choice spread. Murmurs suggested she had succumbed to a captivating new phenomenon, or perhaps she had embraced modernity. In 1857, she repeated the experience during the birth of her 9th child, Princess Beatrice. With newfound assurance, she described it as soothing, serene, and blissful. Her testimony sent ripples through the medical community. If the Queen could experience childbirth without pain, why shouldn't other women have the same? Suddenly, demands for chloroform surged among mothers. The clergy's sermons were no match for the testimony of a monarch who had endured enough to cry out for change. Victoria's choice transformed not only childbirth but the paradigm surrounding female suffering, control, and science. For a fleeting moment, she didn't merely govern an empire, she spearheaded a quiet revolt, reclining, eyes shut, freed momentarily from the agony that her predecessors endured without question. Yet, alongside her modern ideals lay contradictions. She embraced anesthesia while rejecting women's rights and feared progress, even as she birthed it. Nevertheless, her choice marked a vital pivot, transitioning from mysticism to medicine, step by step, facing resistance all around her. As Victoria yielded to science, another royal in the decades that followed would gaze skyward, not for treatment but for extraterrestrial visitors. 6. Prince Philip's fascination with UFOs was a captivating enigma. The Duke of Edinburgh and Queen Elizabeth's consort, he was a man of stern demeanour and unyielding opinions. Whether commanding attention in a crowded room, navigating a Land Rover, or daring to insult foreign dignitaries, Philip was never one to pull his punches. But beneath the layers of military accolades, sharp wit, and aristocratic bravado lay a curious intrigue, a genuine obsession with unidentified flying objects. This was not a casual interest. He deeply engaged with the topic for years. He devoured books covering extraterrestrial life and was rumored to have subscriptions to UFO magazines. During the fervor of Britain's post-war UFO sightings, when RAF bases and entire villages reported strange occurrences, Philip was immersed in the phenomena. It was not merely the spectacle that captivated him. Declassified documents reveal that he actively sought out Ministry of Defense reports on UFO sightings, demanding all available briefings as if conducting a military inquiry. His approach was methodical, imbued with a healthy dose of skepticism yet open to possibilities. Many trace this passion back to Lord Louis Mountbatten, his uncle and mentor, who was similarly intrigued by the unexplained. In 1955, Mountbatten penned a detailed report of a mysterious aerial encounter on his estate involving an unsettling object and a frightened groundskeeper who claimed to have seen something extraordinary emerge from it. Philip, far from mocking such accounts, studied the document with keen interest. His intrigue extended beyond mere academics. Privately, he hosted UFO enthusiasts, researchers, and individuals claiming abduction experiences at Buckingham Palace, engaging them in profound dialogues over tea. One visitor recalled an afternoon spent in a lavish sitting room, engrossed in discussions about propulsion and radar anomalies, all while being served scones. This was not the image of a recluse. Rather, it was a man entangled in the tapestry of royal life, balancing duties with an enduring curiosity that was wholly unique. The same Duke who once bluntly told students they lacked intelligence also collected accounts from pilots chasing unidentified crafts. The tension between his royal status and his insatiable curiosity was striking. A member of one of the world's oldest aristocracies, yet continually looking upwards toward life's greatest mysteries. Here was a royal, laden with tradition and protocol, dedicating free moments to exploring the unseen and unexplainable. While he never publicly claimed to have witnessed a UFO, Philip's intrigue hinted at a desire to be prepared for any eventuality. Perhaps his military background nudged him to remain vigilant against potential threats. Or perhaps it was a deeper yearning for the mysteries that elude logic and formal gatherings. As the world saw him as the Queen's stoic partner, Philip's gaze remained fixed on the strange and mysterious horizons, aware that something extraordinary might lie just beyond reach. Meanwhile, while he contemplated the stars, one of his royal predecessors was indulging in pursuits of a much more earthly, primal, and ferociously carnivorous nature. As we delve into the tale of King Henry VIII, the imagery that comes to mind is far from understated. Here stands a monarch who transformed an entire nation's faith merely to escape his first marriage, a man renowned for marrying 6 times, executing 2 of those wives, and promoting himself to the supreme leader of the Church of England, likely adorned in a feathered hat grand enough to rival a heron. Amid the tumult of political upheaval he orchestrated, One thing endures in popular memory: those enormous turkey legs. You've encountered this visual, whether through portraits, parodies, or Renaissance fair representations. Henry VIII, seated upon his throne, eyes glimmering with authority, clutching a roasted turkey leg resembling a battle club. Grease covers his fingers, perhaps a goblet rests in his other hand, and you get the impression that any request for a share would lead to swift excommunication. Yet, like many legendary visuals, there's a twist to the truth. Remarkably, turkey wasn't a common sight in England until the 1520s. Prior to that period, it was a delicacy reserved for the elite class. Brought in from the Americas, these birds were not only costly and exotic but also quite impractical, a perfect fit for royal feasts. So, while Henry may not have indulged in turkey from a young age, once they made their entrance, he elevated them to the center of his dining table, not solely due to their taste, although delectable, but rather for the bold statement they represented: I am wealthy enough to feast like a king, often leaving a mountain of leftovers behind. Contemporary records of his banquets are staggering. Courses filled with dozens of dishes, exotic fowl, entire boars, pies stuffed with smaller pies, and of course, whole roasted birds, seasoned with spices amassed from across the globe. Henry didn't merely eat to live, he feasted to assert power. Each bite was a piece of propaganda, each chew a proclamation: I am powerful. I am relentless. I am near divine. And don't forget the gravy, of course. This was more than just a culinary display. This was personal branding. Henry had once been a trim, athletic king, a master of jousting, a musician, even a heartthrob of the Renaissance. But a jousting accident in 1536 left his leg forever damaged, altering the course of his life. Exercise became impossible, his mood darkened, and his waistline expanded. Embracing this public persona that inspired both fear and adoration, he became the gluttonous king, with a seemingly unquenchable appetite to match his monumental ego. The turkey leg, greasy, primal, reminiscent of a medieval past, came to symbolize it all. It's telling that while portraits of him don't depict him with a turkey leg, the image nonetheless became indelibly linked. Today, it's reached near meme status as we remember Henry VIII, the insatiable devourer of both wives and poultry. Yet, the cruel irony remains. By the time he approached his final days, food ceased to be a source of joy, it became a burden. His health was failing, movement was a challenge, and his meals had to be carefully moderated. Yet, none dared to advise him to cut back. The court physicians feared his wrath more than the risks of gout. The very king who had once transformed feasts into demonstrations of power ultimately found himself caged by his own appetites, surrounded by luxury yet feeling increasingly alone. A throne built upon excess can indeed feel terribly isolating when the revelry has come to an abrupt end. Meanwhile, another monarch's narrative unfolds, defined not by consumption, but rather by the mysterious legacy of words, wrapped in secrecy, concealed within a silver casket, delivered into a court rife with suspicion. 8. The Casket Letters of Mary, Queen of Scots. History is not always meticulous in its traces. At times, it offers only a locked box, a handful of enigmatic letters, and centuries of conjecture. Enter the enigmatic figure of Mary, Queen of Scots, a tragic persona, a pawn in the political chess game, and the focal point of one of the most bizarre and contentious sagas in royal history, the Casket Letters. This narrative unfolds like a scandal woven with verses, whispers of affairs, and enough dubious handwriting to stir endless speculation. Our tale begins with a silver casket, an ornate vessel believed to contain letters and sonnets in French, allegedly penned by Mary herself. Should they be authentic, the contents bore scandalous implications. It's the year 1567, and Mary has already endured more than most could in a lifetime. Crowned queen at merely 6 days old, wed to the Dauphin of France, and left a widow by the age of 18, she found herself back in Scotland, entangled in a kingdom rife with deceit and treachery, enemies cloaked in false smiles. Then came Lord Darnley, her second spouse, a match that appeared promising, albeit filled with youthful nobility and a dose of Protestant alignment. Yet in truth, he was a tempestuous character, generating animosities at a rapid pace. Their union crumbled shortly after marriage, culminating in Darnley's sensational murder in 1567, a chaotic blend of strangulation and explosion that might as well have been orchestrated by a community theatre troupe seeking revenge. Accusations flew, primarily targeting Mary and her trusted confidant, James Hepburn, Earl of Bothwell. Just 3 months post Darnley's demise, they wed, a choice that either spoke of genuine passion or marked one of the most ill-advised publicity moves in royal affairs. As her adversaries surged, the fabled casket surfaced. Her Protestant foes eagerly claimed to have discovered a jewelry box harboring letters and poems from Mary to Bothwell, pieces pulsating with intimacy, and some with an unsettling fervour. Lines within hinted at the death of Darnley, with one ominously suggesting, "I could wish to be with you when you kill him." These letters, if verified, could condemn her for adultery, conspiracy, and regicide. Her enemies clamoured for abdication, which she relinquished under pressure. Subsequently imprisoned and seeking refuge in England, Mary turned to her cousin, Queen Elizabeth I. Unfortunately, Elizabeth's response was yet another imprisonment, stretching nearly 2 decades. Spoiler alert, the conclusion is grim. Yet here lies the intrigue. The authenticity of the letters remains unverified. Mary herself disclaimed authorship, and her advocates insisted on forgery, poorly replicated from actual letters mingled with planted incriminating phrases. Handwriting specialists have debated the matter. Linguists expressed doubt over matching styles, yet the originals have conveniently vanished, leaving only copies behind. What remains is a queen ensnared by unverifiable documents from a missing box, chronicling a romance potentially shrouded in myth, culminating in an execution that might have shifted the tides of British history. Curiously enough, the silver casket, the supposed smoking gun, has entirely disappeared. Did Mary truly pen those letters? Were they schemes cloaked in desire, or merely an elaborate deception with fatal repercussions? The truth may never be unveiled. In the end, this mystery has outlasted the monarchy it once threatened to append. And in relation to legacies that persist far beyond their time, one of Mary's successors left behind an equally scandalous creation, not inscribed in letters but manifested in wood and leather, a custom-made contrivance skillfully designed for royal mischief. 9. Edward III's peculiar love chair. Long before he ascended to the throne, Edward III was known as Bertie, the dashing playboy prince of the Victorian era. His royal obligations often took a backseat to his indulgent escapades. While Queen Victoria, his mother, spent decades in mourning for her husband, epitomizing public restraint, Bertie chose an entirely different path, immersing himself in a world of pleasure, scandal, and luxurious red velvet. He was notorious for excessive smoking, drinking, gambling, and enjoying the company of many friends. Yet, the pinnacle of his romantic escapades, if such a phrase could even apply, was not a beloved mistress or a scandalous liaison, but rather a peculiar piece of furniture, a custom-crafted chair made to support his extravagant lifestyle. Affectionately and somewhat ironically dubbed Lyre de Mer, or the love chair, this outrageous creation was ordered during one of Bertie's visits to Le Chabinet, a prestigious Parisian brothel known for its well-heeled clientele and impeccable secrecy. The brothel catered to influential aristocrats, artists, and the occasional royal. Bertie, known for his overindulgence, was said to be a loyal patron. However, as he matured and gained considerable weight, he faced challenges in his pursuits. Thus, the love chair emerged as a solution to accommodate his needs. This wasn't just any piece of Louis XV furniture. It was a bizarre engineering feat, designed by skilled Parisian craftsmen. The chair was built to alleviate physical strain for a larger gentleman while offering comfort and accessibility to his concurrent passions. Without delving into explicit details, let's acknowledge that the chair featured strategic openings, robust armrests, and additional support. It was less a reading chair and more an ergonomic marvel, allowing the Prince of Wales to indulge in his favourite pastime alongside two companions without the discomfort of movement. Indeed, royalty can be exhausting. Remarkably, the chair still exists today. It once belonged to a private collection, was briefly showcased in a Paris museum, and even photographed, verifying that this tale was not merely a salacious gossip among uptight Victorians. In a strange way, this comical yet lavish piece of furniture encapsulates Bertie's essence, his grandeur, desires, and insatiable quest for amusement. Here was a man born to fulfill ceremonial duties yet spent a lifetime shunning responsibility, reigning for just 9 years after finally becoming king at the age of 59. Yet, despite his excesses, Bertie was surprisingly well liked, perhaps because he was unapologetically himself, eschewing the pretense of saintliness. His desire for comfort, even if it meant reinventing the concept of furniture, made him relatable. But Edward III's peculiarities seemed grounded in the living world. Other royals, however, appeared less satisfied with their earthly existence, for not every royal narrative concludes with a coffin and a crown. Some continue beyond the grave, traversing into haunted halls and illuminated staircases. In a realm filled with tales of the unexplained, one captivating legend persists, the haunting of Princess Diana. Known as the People's Princess, she remains a figure of both admiration and intrigue, her life marred by tragedy and conspiracy. It seems that some believe her story didn't conclude in 1997, but rather continues to echo. Across England, from the tranquil Althorpe estate where her final resting place lies, reports of her ghost have emerged with unsettling regularity. These sightings aren't mere tabloid fancies but are delivered through hushed tones from visitors, staff, and psychics who profess a connection to her spirit. Let's begin at Althorpe, an estate lush with history and serenity. Here, her burial site on a secluded island symbolizes peace, yet guests have sensed an otherworldly presence, cold drafts, outbursts of emotion, and inexplicable flickering lights have all been reported. One employee shared a chilling account from the early 2000s. Entering a sitting room, they felt an unseen presence, and an unmistakable whiff of Diana's favored fragrance lingered in the air, though the room was bare. Even more evolved are the accounts from purported mediums and psychics who claim to have conversed with Diana's essence. One notable instance came from a medium in Yorkshire in 2001, who asserted Diana communicated warnings regarding the royal family's tensions and conveyed protective messages for her sons. Despite skepticism, the specific details about private areas of Kensington Palace left many astonished. Speaking of Kensington Palace, the former residence of Diana and now home to her eldest son, stories of her continued presence linger. Former staff and security have reported lights illuminating in sealed rooms and the haunting echo of footsteps. One chilling tale recounts a shadowy figure resembling Diana appearing briefly at a window before fading away. Such occurrences lead us to ponder the essence of grief. Are these merely reflections of collective sorrow? They also reveal a unique devotion toward Diana, unmatched by any other modern royal. Unlike Queen Victoria, whose legacy remains in the annals of history, Diana's imprint resonates deeply within the cultural fabric, suggesting that perhaps she never truly departed. These ghostly encounters illustrate how we, the living, create legends from those who left too soon, struggling to embrace the reality of their absence. While Diana may haunt her beloved estate, another royal keeps her spirit alive in a very different way, through the adornment of her dogs in royal garments and arranging their glamorous photo opportunities. In the realm of British royalty, few symbols resonate as profoundly as the beloved Pembroke Welsh corgis of Queen Elizabeth II. While gold coaches and elaborate sceptres might dazzle, it was these adorable canines that truly held her heart. They were more than mere pets. They were her confidants, her shadows, and a delightful reminder that even a monarch could indulge in a touch of whimsy. It's true, Queen Elizabeth's corgis sported their own tiaras during private photo ops. These charming spectacles weren't official royal attire, but rather whimsical accessories crafted for those special moments. Insiders shared tales of these dogs donning customized crowns, creating a delightful juxtaposition of regal charm and playful absurdity. The image of a precious corgi, adorned with a diamond-studded crown atop a plush cushion in Buckingham Palace, mingles fairytale-like enchantment with satirical levity, yet it perfectly embodies the essence of her reign. Over her lifetime, Queen Elizabeth raised more than 30 corgis, starting with her first, Susan, gifted to her on her 18th birthday in 1944. With names like Whisper and Vulcan, these dogs were an integral part of her life, accompanying her everywhere, from car rides to international trips. Reports suggest palace staff were even trained to speak to these furry companions with utmost politeness and prepare their meals with fresh meats. Rumors of a royal dog taster were not far-fetched. The tiaras were not simply a quirky addition. They reflected her unique bond with her corgis, who were loyal and steadfast companions, entirely untainted by the outside world. In a life constantly under scrutiny, the corgis represented a safe harbor, a joyful reminder of the lighter side of royalty. While the images of these tiara-wearing canines never made it to public eyes, insiders reveal they were often shared as humorous holiday cards among friends, hinting at a family dynamic often lacking self-awareness. There are claims that the crowns weren't adorned in precious gems but rather crafted from silver paper or costume metals, blending reality and creativity into a charming narrative. Through it all, the underlying message remained clear. The monarchy, despite its historic gravity, was infused with a sense of humor, often embodied in furry packages waddling through the palace halls. Yet, humor was not a shared sentiment throughout royal history. A king centuries prior found neither laughter nor joy in canines, but rather in a world of witches, salt circles, and the dark arts. The contrast between the two tales speaks volumes about the evolving perceptions of royalty and its quirky quirks. In a world rife with suspicion and political turmoil, King James I of England and VI of Scotland was a man shaped by his fears and fervent beliefs. Renowned for commissioning one of the most significant translations of the Bible, he once condemned tobacco as a loathsome practice. But amidst his many opinions, one fear loomed larger: witches. Not in a metaphorical sense, but in a visceral and haunting reality. He was convinced that these practitioners of dark arts, the very essence of spellcasting and devil worship, were plotting against him. Understanding James's fixation requires an exploration of his tumultuous upbringing. Born into a realm of chaos, his mother, Mary, Queen of Scots, was forced to abdicate when he was an infant. Surrounded by whispers of conspiracy and theological strife, James grew into a ruler who viewed religion as an integral pillar of his identity, intertwined with a sense of paranoia. To him, his kingship was divinely ordained, equating any threat to his authority with a challenge to God himself. Thus, witchcraft became an intensely personal fear. This dread intensified dramatically in 1589 as he prepared to marry Princess Anne of Denmark. His journey across the tumultuous North Sea was disrupted by violent storms, leading to damaged vessels and delays. Instead of attributing these misfortunes to mere nature or misnavigation, James leapt to the conclusion that witches were at work. Inevitably, he believed they had conjured the storm with the aid of Satan. Upon returning to Scotland, he took the reins of the notorious North Berwick witch trials, where more than 70 individuals faced accusations of plotting his murder through witchcraft. Torture and execution marked this dark chapter, with one woman infamously charged with invoking a storm by casting a cat, said to be linked to a corpse, into the sea, further amplifying the absurdity. But James's involvement didn't stop there. In 1597, he published Demonology, a comprehensive discourse on witches, necromancy, and demonic influences. This was no idle fascination. It served as a blueprint for identifying and prosecuting practitioners of the dark arts. He portrayed himself as a valiant monarch of faith, standing guard against impending infernal threats. His writings asserted that witches were a tangible menace, predominantly female, and warned against the charms, familiars, and contracts associated with diabolical dealings. In James's perception, witchcraft transcended mere heresy. It constituted treason against the celestial order, justifying rigorous surveillance, torture, and execution, while painting him as a beacon of light against lurking darkness. Yet, as time passed and his reign matured, James's fervour began to wane. By the time he ascended to the English throne, the witch trials' fervour subsided, and he showed scepticism towards extreme allegations, occasionally extending pardons to those accused. Whether this transformation stemmed from genuine enlightenment or the pressures of political expedience remains ambiguous. Nonetheless, the ripple effects of his policies and propaganda sowed deep seeds of paranoia that would resonate for generations. James left behind not only a Bible or a unified crown, but a legacy marked by a climate of suspicion, trials, and hangings cloaked as divine justice. And while he feared the return of the dead to challenge his reign, one of his successors would learn how to exploit mortality, not as a spectre, but as a potent source of miraculous influence. In the labyrinthine corridors of history, we uncover the enigmatic figure of Henry VI, a monarch who, after his passing, became a symbol of miraculous wonders. His story unfolds like a tragic play, crowned an infant, twice ousted from his throne, imprisoned within his own realm, before meeting a mysterious end in the Tower of London. Henry was, in essence, more of a gentle soul than a ruler, his disposition far from that of a typical king. Sensitive and devout, he shunned the harsh realities of royal power, often preferring solace in a chapel rather than engaging in the ruthless politics surrounding him. Being the prodigy of the famed Henry V, a celebrated hero, young Henry ascended to the throne at merely 9 months old. Yet, as he matured amidst a kingdom spiraling into chaos, his advisers could scarcely mask the growing tumult. His piety, commendable though impractical, led him to establish educational institutions and devote countless hours to prayer. When civil strife engulfed his realm, he became more a pawn than a leader, seized, restored, and ultimately deposed by Edward IV. In 1471, his lifeless form was found in the Tower, his official cause of death attributed to melancholy. However, whispers of foul play loomed large, suggesting Edward IV's involvement. With no autopsy conducted, he was buried quietly at Churchy Abbey, yet this marked only the beginning of his strange legacy. Almost instantaneously, tales emerged of healings surrounding his tomb. The ailing flocked in search of cures, blind eyes were said to see again, and the lame regained their mobility after prayers near his grave. The speed with which these stories spread was astonishing, transforming Henry VI into an unofficial saint-like figure. Though not canonized, he garnered a devoted following, with pilgrims arriving en masse to pay homage, each leaving offerings, fueling the fervour surrounding his tomb. By the ascent of Henry VIII, even the future king recognized the strategic advantage of associating with the miraculous spectre of his family's former foe, a former king whose grave could still serve a purpose. In 1484, Henry VI's remains were exhumed and reinterred at St. George's Chapel in Windsor, ensuring royal homage was conducted under genteel circumstances, solidifying the intertwining of sacred and sovereign authority. Despite the absence of concrete validation for these miracles, relying solely on the whispers buoyed by medieval lore, Henry VI's transformation from a king who struggled in life into a beacon of hope after death captivates the imagination. Where one king succumbed to the trials of existence, his narrative would rise, a testament to the complexities of power, faith, and reverence, a narrative that lingered long after his final breath. And so the allure of the past teeters on the brink, revealing how one mortal's legacy can intertwine with the divine, igniting intrigue even as the curtain falls. In the realm of curious tales, we find ourselves in the world of Prince Charles, now King Charles III, whose affinity for conversing with garden plants sparked bemusement across the tabloids. The media waste no time in painting him as the quirky royal, talking to his beauteous flora while marking time until the end of his mother's lengthy reign. For many in Britain, this reinforced a caricature, a man reputed to don cufflinks to bed, an aficionado of homeopathy, and someone who believed even the humble parsley could engage in dialogue. Yet, beneath the laughter and satirical drawings lay a sincere philosophy he openly embraced. Back in 1986, during a promotional interview for organic farming, a concept not yet mainstream, Charles expressed a belief that would haunt him for years. "I just come and talk to the plants. It's important to talk to them. They respond, I find." Delivered in an earnest, almost bemused tone, this admission highlighted his genuine bafflement over others' perceptions of his actions. The press had a field day, but Charles wasn't indulging in whimsical fantasies. He deeply believed that engaging with nature was crucial for our stewardship of the environment. For Charles, talking to plants transcended eccentricity. It embodied empathy. While the public shrugged, botanists and psychologists voiced a spectrum of opinions. Surprisingly, there is scientific merit to the notion that plants respond to human interaction. Research indicates that sound waves can influence their growth, and other studies delve into how tone, light, and touch shape plant responses. The question of whether a ficus truly delights in praise remains contentious. Yet, like many of Charles's musings, his sentiments were not completely unfounded. The future monarch wasn't merely whispering to rose petals. His passion for the environment sparked groundbreaking advocacy in organic farming, sustainable design, and conservation efforts long before the term climate change became commonplace in political arenas. He took significant strides in these realms, launching Duchy Originals, a successful organic food venture, and re-imagining residential developments to be harmonious with ecological principles. Indeed, while he spoke to the plants, he also funded expansive woodlands. However, the playful imagery of him meandering through a greenhouse, softly encouraging a tender fern, captivated comedians and critics alike, solidifying his image as the unconventional royal with fervent views on myriad topics, from urban planning to yogurt, expressed with the deliberate zeal of one unaccustomed to public relaxation. Remarkably, Charles never shied away from his initial statements. In 2010, he clarified his position, stating, "I didn't actually say I talked to the plants. I said I instructed them," as if the distinction added clarity. This perspective reveals his self-image as more than an eccentric. He envisioned himself as a steward, charged with the welfare of both people and greenery alike. For Charles, land was not a commodity but kin. In the annals of history, some royal legacies flourish in gardens, while others are concealed beneath asphalt. What lies ahead of Oak's intrigue? A missing monarch, an ancient corpse, and a skeleton patiently awaiting discovery below a modern convenience store. For over 500 years, the final resting place of King Richard III has haunted British history, like a missing piece in a forgotten puzzle. The echoes of the Battle of Bosworth in 1485 are still felt, where Richard became the last English monarch to meet his end in battle. After his defeat, he was hastily interred in Leicester, stripped of dignity and paraded as a grim reminder. But the details of his burial became uncertain. Over time, tales evolved. Some said his remains were discarded in the River Soar, while others believed his grave was lost during the dissolution of the monasteries. Ultimately, it was accepted. Richard III's body had vanished into obscurity. Then, in 2012, a remarkable breakthrough occurred beneath a parking lot. Yes, beneath the asphalt of a place once home to the now-gone Greyfriars Church in Leicester. This incredible find emerged not from mere chance but from diligent historical investigation and the thrust of local enthusiasts, energized by the Richard III Society's resolve to reclaim the king's legacy. Equipped with maps, ground-penetrating radar, and an unwavering sense of adventure, archaeologists set to work, digging in a marked parking space. Within days, they unearthed skeletal remains, quickly confirming their groundbreaking find. The bones belonged to a male of the appropriate age and revealed a distinct curvature, an S-shaped spine consistent with the scoliosis long associated with Richard. The public's initial response was one of incredulity. How could a king lie beneath a municipal car park? This discovery felt surreal, a campy twist in the annals of British history. Yet, scientific validation followed. DNA testing linked the remains to Richard's living relatives, and the injuries matched historical accounts of his grisly end, including a lethal blow to his skull, possibly landed after he was disarmed. For centuries, Richard had been characterized as a nefarious villain, a usurper responsible for the deaths of his nephews. However, this revelation invited a re-examination of his narrative. No longer just a malevolent hunchback, he emerged as a complex figure, physically deformed and likely insecure, grappling with the turbulent tides of English history. The discovery transformed him, giving flesh to the legend and igniting fierce debates about his legacy. Was he truly the villain portrayed by Shakespeare, or merely a victim of Tudor smear campaigns? In 2015, Richard III was reinterred with full royal honours in Leicester Cathedral, complete with an impressive tombstone and a ceremonious procession covered live on television. The occasion was both solemn and surreal. A medieval king, once lost beneath asphalt, restored to his royal dignity by modern science. Yet, the irony remained palpable, centuries of search culminating in a parking lot just moments from the heart of Leicester. But amidst the reveal of royal intrigue, not all truths are unearthed. Some remain tightly bound, cloaked in uniformity and shame, as another king's obsession lay not with the dead but with the constraints of corsetry. In the intricate tapestry of royal life, peculiarities can often veer into the realm of obsession. Enter King George IV, a figure who, despite his grand aspirations as the first gentleman of Europe, harbored a secret, a tightly laced corset that served as his steadfast ally for public appearances. This extravagant prince, who transformed Brighton into a dazzling spectacle of architecture and lavishness, contradicted expectations. To the casual observer, he seemed too flamboyant, too indulgent to adhere to the stringent demands of fashion. Yet, behind the flamboyance lay a struggle against a corporeal reality. By the time he reached his 40s, George's robust figure, rumoured to weigh around 250 pounds, was the subject of both dismay and intrigue. At a time when royal portraits meticulously concealed imperfections, his solution was striking: a series of tightly laced corsets, crafted with the finest boning and reinforced by steel. His tailor revealed that these garments weren't mere embellishments. They were instruments of illusion, reshaping his body to mirror the fashionable ideal of the era. The corsets weren't ephemeral solutions for occasional celebrations. George would wear them for hours, often enduring discomfort and even faintness, not out of necessity, but from a vanity that drove him to present a youthful and elegant facade. It's a striking dichotomy. A king who commissioned the extravagant Brighton Pavilion, resembling a dreamlike fusion of majesty and whimsy, yet couldn't bear to confront his own natural form. He adorned his surroundings in silks but constricted his own body like a stage prop. The whispers in court, bemused and critical, highlighted the relentless tightening of his garb. A foreign diplomat quipped cruelly about George's royal ambitions clashing with indulgent excess, likening him to a man on the brink of bursting, not from power, but from too many desserts. Still, King George persisted, pulling the laces tighter, applying makeup to enhance his youthful appearance, convinced that maintaining the illusion of control was paramount. Behind closed doors, though, the corsets took a toll, compromising his health with breathing difficulties and possible digestive issues. To openly surrender to his body's natural state was a fate he could not entertain. Pain became his companion, illusion his pursuit. Royalty, for him, was a performance, every detail a carefully crafted costume. In an era where the facade often eclipsed genuine governance, George was less revered for his leadership and more for his theatrical presence. Yet as he continued to intertwine himself in this painful elegance, an unexpected upheaval loomed within his royal circle, one far stranger than scandal or rebellion, a bizarre chaos that would lead to a phenomenon as perplexing as it was deadly, dancing until death. In a world where royal visits typically embody the essence of formalities, handshakes, speeches, and fragrant perfumes, one particular visit took a demure turn into the realm of the bizarre. It was the 16th century when news of a strange phenomenon reached Marian of England, infamously known as Bloody Mary. No ordinary threat of treachery or warfare was at hand. Instead, she faced an extraordinary epidemic of dance, an uncontrollable frenzy that gripped the city of Strasbourg. As reports trickled in, what began as a few participants spiraled into hundreds, moving chaotically through the streets, devoid of rhythm or reason, dancing for days until sheer exhaustion took them down. Some even danced to their demise. To modern eyes, the tales of this dancing plague might evoke skepticism, derised as mere mass hysteria, ergot poisoning, or medieval myth. Yet at that time, the accounts incited genuine alarm, reaching the English court swiftly, likely through diplomatic channels or ecclesiastical reports. Mary's reaction was anything but composed. Unlike her father, the boisterous Henry VIII, she was deeply religious, emotionally intense, and gripped by anxiety over rebellion and divine wrath. Her precarious reign, already shadowed by religious strife and isolation, made this outbreak loom large, a sign that transcended mere illness. Some narratives hint that she perceived this dance as a dire spiritual omen. Allegedly, Mary banned music and dance at court for weeks, fearing such indulgences could awaken a similar affliction in England. Reports circulated about her seeking counsel from clergy, contemplating the incident's demonic undertones. Others proposed she saw the outbreak as evidence of societal sinfulness, asserting the affliction resided not in the body but within the soul itself. While historical records lacked an official decree against dance, many accounts indicate an unusual pall cast over court festivities during her rule. Whether or not the Strasbourg incident influenced her, it resonated with Mary's worldview, where delight was a perilous temptation, and surrender to the flesh was akin to moral decay. What unnerved Mary and captured the court's fascination was the outbreak's incomprehensible nature. It struck indiscriminately across all social segments, with no apparent cause or pattern, confounding both medical and ethical reasoning. It served as a stark reminder that control, even for those clad in crowns, is a tenuous facade. For Mary, the true terror lay not merely in the possibility of her subjects dancing, but rather that they might cease to heed her words. If unchecked joy could spiral into madness, then the spectre of rebellion loomed frighteningly close. Meanwhile, just a generation later, another queen would confront an entirely different dilemma. Too much control grasped too tightly in one set of hands. In the realm of Tudor legends, Anne Boleyn occupies a haunting yet pivotal position. She teeters between the roles of temptress and victim, saint and witch. Her life story is nothing short of extraordinary, a clever and charismatic figure who ascended from lady-in-waiting to the Queen of England, dismantled the Catholic Church's stronghold, failed to provide a male heir, and faced execution barely 3 years after her crowning. Yet within this already dramatic narrative lies one of the most peculiar and enduring myths in royal lore, the notion that Anne possessed 6 fingers on one hand. This peculiar detail has shadowed her legacy for centuries. What began as an anatomical oddity morphed into folklore, shared across generations like a dark fairy tale with political twists. The alleged 6th finger, often described as a deformed appendage on her right hand, became a symbol of everything from witchcraft to moral decay, suggesting her very body was at odds with divine intent. But where did this bizarre gossip originate? Strikingly, there are no references to any physical deformities during Anne's lifetime, nor from those who opposed her following her death in 1536. She was often depicted as elegant and stylish, a trendsetter in her own right. Eustace Chapuis, the Spanish ambassador and a critic of Anne, consistently referred to her as a concubine in his correspondences, yet he never hinted at any unusual physical traits that could have been exploited for scandal. The myth seems to have taken root in the years following her execution, particularly through the writings of Nicholas Sanders, a Catholic recusant active during the reign of Elizabeth I, Anne's daughter. Sanders, more than just a historian, had a vested interest in undermining the Protestant monarchy. By portraying Anne as deformed and cursed, he created an effective piece of propaganda. The idea of an extra finger, a medieval emblem of witchcraft, fits seamlessly into his narrative. Sanders claimed she had a protruding tooth, a significant wart, and indeed, that 6th finger, all attributes straight from the witchcraft folklore of the time. This character assassination, steeped in phrenology, took hold over time. The story proved too alluring to discard. Ironically, Anne Boleyn likely conformed to Tudor beauty standards, not as the archetypal blonde beauty but as a striking figure with dark hair, brown eyes, and olive skin, possessing a long, graceful neck. No evidence suggests she wore gloves constantly, nor are there portraits depicting her right hand obscured by cloth. In fact, surviving images consistently show her hands as perfectly normal. Yet the legend of the 6-fingered queen endures, for it encapsulates a narrative of a woman who was deemed too intelligent, too powerful, too ambitious. Thus, something must have been amiss, some form of the unnatural. This extra digit became a metaphor, distinctively marking her as other, as a threat, as one who transcended the confines of her role in society. Ultimately, it is telling that history remembers Anne not for her intellect, political influence, or legacy through her daughter, but rather as a figure linked to an imagined phantasm of a finger she likely never possessed. While her story was sculpted by rumors and vilifications, her royal descendant charted a different course, embodying a daily indulgence with regal assurance, symbolized by a fork each morning. In the grand tapestry of British royalty, Queen Victoria is often cast as a somber figure draped in black, an indelible emblem of stoicism, embodying the phrase "we are not amused." Yet, behind the curtain of her stern public persona lay a woman of desires, wit, and, tucked away in the serenity of her chambers, a penchant for whiskey at dawn. Surprisingly, this ruler of an empire didn't start her mornings with tea, but rather with a resolute pour of scotch, an addition to her breakfast eggs as part of her daily ritual. It wasn't an impulsive choice. This was an established custom. The most formidable woman of her time would rise, sit down for her meal, and indulge in a drink, a remarkable idea when considering the Victorian context. Whiskey in that era wasn't simply a social libation. It was hailed for its medicinal properties, deemed a tonic, an aid for digestion, a remedy for fatigue, and a bulwark against ailments ranging from colds to blues. For Victoria, who governed a sprawling empire rife with strife and expectations, melancholy was no stranger. Her favoured whiskey was Scotch, particularly from the Lochinega distillery near her cherished Balmoral castle. This affection led Victoria and her husband, Prince Albert, to bestow a royal warrant upon the distillery in 1848 following a personal visit. Henceforth, Royal Lochnagar became a staple in the royal household, intended not only for gatherings but for the Queen's own consumption. It said she enjoyed her whiskey mixed with claret, creating a robust blend known as Morning Glory Fizz, or straight, neat, and potent, reflective of her resilient spirit. This wasn't mere indulgence. It was a ritual, a flicker of autonomy in a life often constrained by duty. Naturally, such habits were absent from official portraits and palace pronouncements. After all, the monarchy hid behind its ideals, and Victoria was projected as a bastion of virtue, not a woman partaking in spirits before noon. However, her diaries, letters, and reports from her staff unveil a richer character, one who cursed in different tongues, adored her offspring, loathed restrictive footwear, cherished her Highland staff, and once shocked dinner guests with a casual request for more venison mid-sermon. In this light, the whiskey wasn't defiance. It was genuine self-expression, an acknowledgement from a queen who grasped the gravity of decorum while embracing a spirited venue within it. Even as she aged and sorrow marked her public presence, Victoria clung to the small pleasures that rendered royal life more bearable, whether it was a tailored bathing machine, her cadre of footmen, or the comforting warmth of a fine Highland malt. She recognized the delicate balance between authority and comfort, which intertwined elegantly in her existence. Yet, while Victoria's afternoon whiskey raised only a few eyebrows, the actions of a future royal would set off a firestorm of controversy, one sparked not by a drink but by a costume so outlandish, it continues to echo through the annals of the House of Windsor. 20. The controversy of Prince Harry's costume. Among the many stories the British royal family has sought to suppress, few stand out as glaringly toxic and perpetually embarrassing as one that surfaced on January 13, 2005, in The Sun. The image on the front page captured a youthful Prince Harry, just 20 at the time, attending a private costume party in Wiltshire, clad in khaki with a red armband emblazoned with a swastika, a drink in hand, and a grin on his face. The bold headline screamed, "Harry the Nazi." There was no nuance, no cleverness, just an overwhelming scandal that ignited the public's fury like a wildfire fueled by reckless choices and inadequate upbringing. To describe the outrage it incited is putting it mildly. Politicians roared their disapproval. Jewish leaders voiced profound hurt, and Holocaust survivors termed it grotesque. The palace, typically reserved in its responses, quickly issued an apology on Harry's behalf, a rare break from protocol. The depth of the issue wasn't merely in Harry's choice of costume. It lay in the potent symbolism behind it. This was Prince Harry, the grandson of Queen Elizabeth II and great-grandson of King George VI, who led Britain against Nazi Germany during the Second World War, now dressing as the enemy. Not as an act of satire, not as a historical joke, but simply for amusement at a party. Context only added fuel to the fire. The theme of the gathering was colonialism, a title that now seems fraught with red flags. While other attendees donned safari outfits or mock tribal wear, each problematic in their own ways, Harry chose to appear as a Luftwaffe pilot, complete with a swastika armband, a symbol bearing the heavy burden of genocide, fascism, and his family's own wartime history. Critics quickly noted that this was more than a youthful misstep. Harry, despite his youth, was a public figure, a key representative of a monarchy that rests upon a facade of moral authority. In this moment, many saw nothing less than casual cruelty masked as royal privilege. The consequences were immediate and harsh. The very next day, Harry expressed regret, stating he was very sorry if I caused any offense or embarrassment, a response so sanitized it could have come straight from a porcelain plate. Behind closed doors, however, the incident sparked a significant reckoning. Charles was enraged, William felt humiliated, and the palace public relations team worked in overdrive. For the first time, Harry began to grasp that his actions, previously shrugged off as just Harry being Harry, carried repercussions far beyond his individual self. In subsequent years, he underwent a remarkable transformation, engaging in military service, charitable work, and advocating for mental health. Publicly, he grappled painfully with the weight of that reckless decision. Decades later, in interviews, he would candidly reflect on the incident as one of the biggest mistakes of my life, expressing deep remorse for his lack of understanding regarding history and the significance of the symbol he wore. This moment ultimately shaped his commitment to education, service, and activism. Yet that infamous photo remains, an image of a prince, momentarily adrift in thoughtlessness, frozen in time, echoing through the institution into which he was born. An institution built on an intricate tapestry of image, pageantry, and a historical reverence that make such blunders particularly hard to absolve. And while Harry's scandal was a collision of youthful folly and privilege, another intriguing royal saga loomed, a bizarre tale not targeting the monarchy directly but rather one of its closely guarded secrets, royal underwear. In the realm of royal intrigue, some tales crash onto the scene with explosive drama, abdicating monarchs, scandalous affairs, and powerful declarations that shake the very foundations of government. Yet, nestled quietly among these grand narratives lies a story that tiptoes in, wrapped in silk and shrouded in whispers, the curious theft of a pair of Queen Victoria's undergarments, which were illicitly offered up to the highest bidder. Yes, you heard right. This peculiar incident is as real as it is bizarre, a well-documented episode that has left historians scratching their heads and auctioneers chuckling, reinforcing the notion that nothing is sacred in the realm of royal memorabilia. As we take a closer look, we find that Queen Victoria, despite her stern public image, had a surprisingly unpretentious approach to her attire. In her later years, she favored garments that prioritized comfort, wide bloomers, substantial petticoats, and long cotton drawers that reached far below the knee. Her choices were not driven by fashion, but practicality, with each garment crafted from luxurious fabrics adorned with royal insignia, often showcasing her initials or a delicate crown. These were no ordinary pieces. They were treasures reserved for royalty, and over time, they sparked immense curiosity. Fast forward to the early 21st century, and an unexpected niche market began to emerge centered around royal underwear. Prized items claimed to have belonged to Queen Victoria, with origins dating back as far as the 1860s, began to surface in auction houses. These were not clandestine deals hidden away. These were public sales complete with certificates of authenticity, fabric analyses, and embroidered telltales. In one notable sale at Lion and Turnbull in Edinburgh, a pair fetched over £4,000, largely due to the embroidered VR for Victoria Regina and the waistband, a significant insight into her later life figure. However, the narrative took a darker twist when reports emerged indicating that some of these items had mysteriously vanished from private royal collections or from former royal residences converted into museums. What had started as an amusing anecdote mutated into a small-scale mystery. were some of Queen Victoria's intimate garments stolen. One shocking allegation involved a dealer attempting to sell a pair of bloomers with ties to a private estate formerly linked to the royal lineage. Yet, upon scrutiny, the provenance became shrouded in ambiguity. Questions bubbled to the surface. Who were the current owners? How did they come to possess such relics? Were they gifts, lost in time, or simply pilfered in a moment of opportunism? Though no prosecutions occurred, the narrative endured. It prompted unsettling inquiries into the boundaries separating historical significance from theft, especially regarding royal artifacts. What, after all, constitutes a treasure? Is a pair of bloomers over a century-old a national heirloom, an amusing curiosity, or a stolen remnant entwined in lace? The thought of Queen Victoria's undergarments being exchanged at auctions may seem laughable, yet it highlights a deeper, more persistent need to humanize the monarchy. By uncovering their vulnerabilities, even down to their laundry, we connect to them on a more relatable level. However, be warned, the line between respect and voyeurism is remarkably thin, and in this instance, it is woven from fine Victorian cotton. Yet not all royal remnants were taken so lightly. One king, after a particularly grim fate, losing his head, quite literally, received a macabre gesture that danced on the border of dignity and the surreal. They stitched it back on. 22. The head of Charles furs restitched. The execution of King Charles I in 1649 stands as a pivotal moment in British history. The unprecedented event where a king was put on trial, condemned, and publicly executed by his own citizens. This act symbolized the climax of a protracted and fierce civil conflict between royalists and parliamentarians, a struggle not merely over governance but over the divine right to rule. The resolution was clear. Parliament prevailed, and Charles met a fateful end, his head severed from his body. On that bitterly cold January morning in Whitehall, the king approached the scaffold, donning 2 shirts to mask his shivers and maintain a facade of bravery before the still crowd. He delivered a brief speech articulating his belief in divine authority before laying his neck on the block. A single swing of the executioner's axe ended his life, but what transpired next was even stranger. In a custom steeped in shocking ritual, the executioner displayed Charles's severed head to the audience, symbolizing the definitive fall of monarchy. Yet behind the curtain, a curious arrangement was unfolding. His head was sewn back onto his body. Why, one might ask. In part, it was to uphold the ceremonial traditions that seemed unyielding, even amidst revolution. Following the grim execution, devoted royalists ensured Charles was treated with dignity, despite the inherent challenges of the situation. Driven by a desire to maintain an illusion of royal sanctity, a surgeon or royal attendant undertook the odd yet respectful task of stitching the head back in place. This was not an unprecedented act. In a society fixated on bodily completeness, reattaching heads carried symbolic significance, serving as a kind of posthumous gesture of respect. Once the restoration was complete, Charles's preserved body was placed in a coffin and interred at St. George's Chapel in Windsor, lying next to others of royal lineage in a burial shrouded in privacy, an attempt by Parliament to avert martyrdom. There were no ostentatious funeral processions or public displays of mourning. Rather, it marked a bizarre finale for a king who had lost not just his sovereign power but also his head in the pursuit of constitutional change. Fast forward to the 19th century, when renovations at Windsor prompted a brief opening of Charles's coffin. Eyewitnesses noted the skull had been detached at some moment in history, yet the remnants of the seam where it had been reattached were still discernible, the ultimate indication that even kings who had met such a grisly end could receive one last respect. The contrast is macabre yet strangely poignant. Despite the fall of the monarchy, the rituals persisted, weaving a narrative of defiance, reverence, and unwavering tradition. And while the tale of Charles concluded with a semblance of closure, another royal saga was destined to unravel, that of a queen marked by heartbreak, unconventional medical practices, and a series of pregnancies that tragically kept eluding life. 23. Queen Anne's overwhelming journey through motherhood tells a poignant story of the intersection between royalty and sorrow. The throne, often envisioned as an emblem of strength and legacy, became for Anne, the final queen of the House of Stuart, a solitary domain echoing with the unheard cries of her lost children. Behind the glittering facade of her crown lay a life marked not by glamour, but by an incessant cycle of tragedy. Throughout her marriage, she endured 17 pregnancies, yet a mere one of her offspring survived beyond infancy, and tragically, even he succumbed before reaching his 12th year. This heart-wrenching reality defied the odds, casting a long shadow of grief over Anne's existence. Married at the tender age of 18 to Prince George of Denmark, the weight of expectation bore down upon her as she sought to secure an heir. Her early attempts yielded heartbreak, 3 pregnancies ending in miscarriage, followed by the stillbirth of a daughter, and then a fleeting moment of joy with a live birth that lasted only hours. This relentless cycle of hope shattered over and over. In 1689, Anne welcomed Prince William, Duke of Gloucester, the singular glimmer of survival in her tumultuous life. Yet, this fragile light was dimmed by illness, and by just 11, William too was lost. The emotional toll of these losses left an indelible mark on and, irrevocably altering her very being. The medical enigma surrounding her frequent miscarriages and adversities has never been fully unveiled. Some historians hypothesize that she battled ailments such as lupus or antiphospholipid syndrome, conditions that heighten miscarriage risk. Others propose that a possible diabetes or hormonal irregularities were exacerbated by the era's rudimentary and often harmful treatments. Think bloodletting and leeches. What is certain, however, is that her body continuously betrayed her in this most agonizing and publicly shaming manner. As a queen, Anne found herself unable to fulfill the most critical demand of monarchy, the production of a living heir. This personal anguish escalated into a constitutional quandary. By the dawn of the 1700s, the Stuart lineage was dwindling, prompting Parliament to enact the Act of Settlement in 1701, excluding Catholics from succession and circumventing numerous closer relations to secure a Protestant claim to the throne. Thus, upon her death in 1714, childless and in failing health, power shifted to George I, a remote relation from the German House of Hanover, a man who spoke no English. This demise of the Stuart line was not due to betrayal or defeat, but rather in profound silence. In portraits, Queen Anne appears to be burdened by a heaviness that transcends the material weight of her attire. Her reign saw significant political milestones, including the union of England and Scotland and the War of the Spanish Succession. Yet, her personal narrative was punctuated by an enduring absence, the empty cradles and quiet chambers filled with a sorrow that rarely garners headlines yet resonates throughout history. Yet, within the palace's ornate walls, Anne was not alone in her invisible grief, for as she mourned her lost children, another royal wandered the corridors haunted by a very different spectre, one far less comforting for the palace guests. 24. The ethereal companion of Princess Alexandra. Should fate ever grant you an invitation to a royal gathering, it's prudent to refine your etiquette, moderate your enthusiasm, and perhaps, just perhaps, avoid tripping over unseen feline friends. This peculiar advice resonates deeply when considering the life of Princess Alexandra of Bavaria, a 19th-century royal figure radiating an aura of fragile grace. A lover of essays and translations, she adorned herself in white and developed an obsession with social niceties. Yet within this facade of refinement lay a realm all her own, one that embraced an ethereal, phantom-like cat. Accounts from her time reveal a compelling truth. Princess Alexandra was utterly convinced that an invisible white cat shadowed her every step throughout the palace. To deny its presence was unfathomable. She would pause before doorways to ensure it could glide past, yield in corridors to prevent its potential harm, and caution others to tread carefully. To her, this ghostly creature existed with vivid palpability, while to the rest of the court, it remained unseen. Such beliefs were not trivial flights of fancy. They were the cornerstone of her everyday reality, a conviction that shaped her existence. Strangely enough, no one dared to challenge this notion within the royal walls. Perhaps it was easier to indulge an imaginary feline than to face the unsettling possibility of a royal mind in turmoil. Yet Alexandra's eccentric beliefs extended beyond her invisible companion. In one of history's most bizarre self-assessments, she maintained she had ingested an entire glass grand piano, not a mere trinket, but a fully realized instrument, delicately lodged in her being. Her fear of shattering that fragile creation with the slightest movement left her walking with utmost caution, draped in white to symbolize her vulnerability, demanding that those nearby treat her with utmost care. While contemporary scholars suggest she may have suffered from delusional disorder or schizophrenia, diagnoses unheard of in her time, her behaviors were simply dismissed as melancholic or nervous eccentricities, terms that soften the reality of female uniqueness during an era reluctant to embrace uncomfortable discussions. The response from her court was neither reprimand nor correction. They merely allowed her to persist in her beliefs. Her invisible feline friend represented but one facet of an intricately woven inner life. It could have been a coping tool, a projection, or simply an imagined confidant, created to navigate the stifling confines of her royal existence. Born to King Ludwig I, known for his own peculiarities, and a sister to King Ludwig II, who would later dream up Neuschwanstein Castle, a masterpiece of fantastical architecture, eccentricity seemed to flow through her lineage. Just like fine silverware or hushed whispers of scandal, the ghostly cat became a symbol of fragility, isolation, and the invisible weight of royal expectations. Alexandra remained unmarried, lived a quiet life filled with private writings, and passed away without progeny, her narrative largely overshadowed by the annals of royal history, likely because it defied the conventional tales of legacies and power. Yet, amongst the marble effigies and fine paintings, one might still hear the soft whispers of an unseen cat tracing its path throughout the shadows of history. Alexandra's wondrous delusions remain tender and harmless, in stark contrast to the next legend, a tale of a prince burdened not by the mind, but by something far more cumbersome. Amidst the elegant rituals of royal life, the gentle waves, the practiced curtsies, and the splendid hats gracing garden festivities, whispers of peculiar rumors persist, stories so bizarre, they challenge the bounds of propriety. One such curious narrative centers on Prince Albert, husband of Queen Victoria and a pivotal figure in modernizing the British monarchy. He was a trailblazer, a devoted partner, and, according to persistent folklore, the alleged origin of a notorious body alteration known as the Prince Albert piercing. Yes, indeed, that very piercing. It's essential to clarify. There exists no documentation in the royal archives that substantiates this claim. No medical records, no journal entries, and certainly no accounts from court physicians detailing such an unconventional adaptation. Yet, the tale endures, whispered from generation to generation. Legend has it that Prince Albert donned a ring not in the customary royal fashion, but as a practical solution to manage the fit of his snug trousers, a staple of the unforgiving Victorian style. The notion suggests that this modification permitted him to adjust with precision, presenting a refined silhouette in an era where modesty was more theatre than truth and garments were ever so revealing. The piercing, it is said, could be secured by a tiny hook stitched into the waistband, almost as a regal precaution for fashion. But does this story hold any truth? Historians express skepticism, as references linking the piercing to Prince Albert only surfaced in the 1970s, long after his passing. Speculation suggests that Jim Ward, an architect of the modern body piercing movement, may have forged this connection, lending it a historical narrative for commercial appeal. Amidst all this intrigue, the tale resonates with an undeniable allure. Albert was, after all, a man of his time yet out of sync with it, a champion of education, science, and even sanitation. His attentive devotion to Queen Victoria, coupled with a fiery marital passion, has inspired a myriad of innuendos, exaggerated by historians seeking to illuminate the complexities of a repressed age. Regardless of the truth behind the royal ring, this myth has woven itself into the tapestry of Albert's enigmatic legacy, lingering in hushed pub discussions, online trivia, and slightly awkward museum guides. However, if Albert's saga navigated themes of control and convenience, the next royal narrative is painted in stark contrast, an epic of love, exile, and a fateful curse that cast a shadow over the monarchy. The saga of Edward VII is often recounted as a bittersweet love story, a king who forsook his throne for passion. It seems like a fairy tale, with Edward so enthralled by Wallis Simpson, an American with 2 divorces behind her, that he relinquished everything: his crown, his empire, and the very heart of monarchy. Yet, beyond the glamorous headlines and dramatized adaptations lies a more peculiar narrative, a tale hinting that Edward's abdication was less about romance and more about an ancient curse. Our narrative begins well before that fateful year of 1936. Wallis, even before her entanglement with the Prince of Wales, was already at the centre of societal scandal. An outspoken, politically unconventional figure, she carried with her an unsettling reputation among the British elite. To the servants of the royal household, whispers emerged of an ill omen, a belief that misfortune shadowed her every step. A series of unfortunate events seemed to trail her, coinciding ominously with her entrance into royal circles. Staff shared hushed tones about her being a jinx, perhaps even cursed, akin to a royal Jonah capable of dragging down the kingdom herself. Owner of jewelry rumoured to possess strange powers, one maid even hesitated to enter Wallis's dressing area alone, citing feelings of dread. Footmen recounted restless nights filled with nightmares, while polished silver inexplicably dulled overnight, and plants withered in her presence. Though such tales remained in the shadows, they whispered of an enchanting yet ominous curse that surrounded the royal family. When Edward ultimately chose Wallis over his kingdom, many proclaimed it a romantic decision, while others deemed it unavoidable. Yet, those veterans of the royal household whispered of destiny's fulfillment through the curse, a belief that Wallis was never destined for queenship because the monarchy itself would thwart her ascendance. An unseen force, perhaps sinister, had intervened. After stepping down, Edward and Wallis experienced a gilded exile, moving through Europe, estranged from true political relevance and mistrusted by their kin. Though their love persevered, their existence morphed into more of a cautionary tale, a lesson on the dangers of defying royal destiny. Even now, Wallis's name still evokes an enigmatic air of superstition, representing the woman who compelled a king to abdicate and whose presence seemed to chill even the stalwart royal staff. Some regard her as merely human, others think of her as a curse draped in pearls. While Edward and Wallis wandered through their elegant solitude, a different royal discovered joy in constructing her own intricate world, a realm equipped with flushing toilets and functioning electricity. Queen Mary's fascination with dollhouses stands out amid the rigid portraits and lavish jewels associated with British royalty. This unique passion, both innocent and intensely consuming, attracts countless visitors to Windsor Castle each year. It wasn't extravagant jewels or fashionable balls that captivated her. It was a dollhouse. Not just any ordinary construction, but Queen Mary's own dollhouse, a breathtaking, almost surreal miniature version of a royal residence, complete with flushing toilets, operational electricity, wine cellars, and even authentic books by acclaimed authors, all crafted to a meticulous 1/12 scale. This dollhouse is renowned as the largest and most intricately detailed miniature ever created, designed not for children, but for a queen herself. Commissioned in 1921 for Queen Mary, spouse of King George V, its creation quickly escalated from a light-hearted project into a grand architectural undertaking. Over 1,500 skilled artists and craftsmen contributed, ensuring every element was decidedly perfect. The library held titles penned by writers such as Rudyard Kipling and J.M. Barrie, tailored specifically for its tiny inhabitants. The kitchen brimmed with miniature food and little silver tins. Even the elevators and gramophones functioned. The wine cellar was outfitted with hundreds of meticulously labeled bottles. This was more than a simple dollhouse. It symbolized an ode to the British Empire, capturing Queen Mary's essence, diligent, controlling, and profoundly sentimental. She reportedly devoted hours to admiring her creation, arranging it with a precise hand. One servant shared tales of the Queen's gentle, fixated regard for the dollhouse, looking at it as a flawless version of Windsor itself, one free from imperfection. Yet, beneath its charming surface lurked a more peculiar reality, a monarch striving to encapsulate an idealized world, shielding it from chaos, scandal, and political turmoil. While beautiful, the dollhouse emits an air of a mausoleum, a time capsule of a fading empire. Queen Mary witnessed the monarchy struggle through the horrors of World War I, her cousin's assassination, and the rise of modernism that threatened royal traditions. In many ways, the dollhouse served as a defiance, a realm where time stands still, sheets remain immaculate, and servants never utter complaints, where abdications are mere whispers of the past. Yet, as she constructed her perfect haven from miniature bricks, one royal ancestor reportedly ventured from beyond, not to tidy but to race through London's nightscape, chased by headless horses devoid of both rider and master. In the dimly lit streets of London, as the clock strikes the witching hour, an eerie sound may drift through the air, the unmistakable clatter of hoofbeats echoing in the stillness. Fear not, it could simply be an evening delivery. Yet, for those attuned to the supernatural, another explanation looms. The phantom carriage of King George I, forever condemned to traverse the night, is said to be drawn by a team of headless horses, bearing a monarch who found little peace in life and, it seems, even less in death. This peculiar tale forms a compelling addition to the tapestry of British royal folklore, rich with symbolism. George I, the inaugural Hanoverian king, took the throne in 1714 after the childless queen and passed away. His selection was not rooted in affection or national loyalty, but rather his standing as the nearest Protestant relative permitted under the Act of Settlement. With his scant English and inability to resonate with his subjects, he remained largely isolated, often longing for his native Hanover. Perhaps it is only fitting that his spirit is now said to wander, as befuddled in death as he was in his courtly life. Legend tells of his spectral rides near St. James's Palace or Whitehall, shrouded in darkness within a ghostly carriage that captivates the imagination like a scene from Gothic fiction. Eyewitness accounts over the centuries depict a haunting stillness surrounding the magnificent yet chilling sight. The headless horses, ethereal and steaming, seem to move by an unseen hand, while inside the carriage, a solitary figure clad in royal garb gazes blankly ahead, pale and hollow-eyed. While ghostly carriages are not rare in European lore, the story of George I stands out, steeped in irony, a reluctant ruler on the throne of a nation he barely understood, who died alone and uncelebrated, far from the people he was meant to govern. After his passing in 1727, His remains were returned to Hanover and interred with little national acknowledgement, nearly forgotten by the British public, while his ghost remains perennially aware of their indifference. Some say he rides forth on significant political anniversaries. Others assert he reappears during times of royal unrest, a tortured spirit drawn to the complexities of governance. Whether or not this phantom carriage truly exists, its image lingers, a king trapped in an endless journey, surrounded by headless steeds, forever lost on the roads of a spectral London. Yet, while King George I is said to be cursed to wander eternally, his successor revelled in the earthly joys of life, indulging in the pleasures of a scandalous love life, particularly with an actress, reflecting a stark contrast to his ghostly predecessor. In the vibrant tapestry of British monarchy, William IV emerges as a captivating figure amid the shadows of tradition. Long before he ascended the throne, he thrived as a naval officer and a consternated bachelor, for he was the father of a staggering 10 illegitimate children, all with a woman never bound by marriage. During a period rife with the slightest royal slip causing potential uproar, William's personal life stood as a remarkable testimony to casual defiance. His partner, the enchanting Irish actress Dorothea Jordan, became the center of his universe. For over 2 decades, they navigated life together in a relationship that mirrored a domestic partnership, albeit without the formalities. Talented and adored on stage, Dorothea captured William's heart, affectionately dubbed Dora by him, and together they forged a family that bore the surname Fitzclarence, coined from his ducal title. Although positioned outside the royal line of succession, these children were not shunned. Instead, they were publicly acknowledged and supported, receiving noble titles later in life. William's embrace of his role as a father was surprising, revealing a depth of affection, though often his memory faltered on their names. The royal court, perplexed by this unconventional familial structure, grappled with William's openness about his life. The third son of George III, he was hardly next in line but undeniably unreserved. Their home in Bushy Park was alive with laughter and domestic joys, starkly contrasting the political machinations expected of him. Their partnership, however, ultimately succumbed to financial strain. As debts accumulated and Dorothea's career waned, the urging from the crown for a more acceptable marriage led her to leave. The children would receive education and be set on promising paths before William married Princess Adelaide of Saxe-Mundingen, with whom he would never bear living heirs. In a twist of fate, the crown passed to his niece, Queen Victoria, yet even as king, William remained a steadfast presence in his children's lives. He honoured his eldest son, George Fitzclarence, with the title Earl of Munster and facilitated noble unions for his daughters. In a world where many royals concealed their illegitimate offspring, William cherished them, viewing them as an indelible part of his legacy. Thus, the tale unfolds of a monarch who wore his imperfections with pride, a ruler who fostered a household blended with genuine emotion and affection. While William IV brought life and laughter into his regal domain, it contrasted sharply with the grim legacy left by one of his royal ancestors, a palace notorious for its foulness and scandals, capable of clearing a court with mere whispers of its past. 30. The malodorous palaces of Henry VII. Most envision Henry VIII and picture grand portraits, lavish banquets, 6 ill-fated wives, and a boisterous laughter that resonates through ancient stone halls. Yet, lurking in the shadows of this regal image lies a less glamorous truth, the overpowering stench of his court. Despite his tremendous wealth and authority, Henry presided over palaces that would be deemed uninhabitable by today's standards, teetering on the brink of septic nightmares. Let's delve into the fundamentals. Plumbing. It simply didn't exist in the way we understand it now. Spectacular residences such as Hampton Court and Whitehall boasted sprawling Tudor architecture adorned with gilded ceilings, exotic tapestries, and masterful wood carvings. However, Beneath this facade, they rested atop open cesspits, chamber pots, and overflowing privy channels. These primitive sewage systems were infrequently cleaned and often ran directly beneath the palace interiors, unleashing a relentless, stomach-turning odor that even the finest incense couldn't mask. A particularly vivid account from the time vividly describes Hampton Court's royal privy, tucked away in a turret meant solely for the king and a select few. Waste flowed by gravity directly under the very floors where courtiers and servants trod. The resulting fumes were so unbearable that entire wings of the palace would be vacated during the sweltering months to avoid guests fainting from the noxious air. Illness outbreaks were documented, originating not from foreign foes, but from the foul vapors seeping from the king's own residence. Then there was the groom of the stool, an actual title held by a real individual tasked with managing the king's bathroom habits. Henry VIII had a specially crafted velvet-covered commode, and his groom not only assisted but was responsible for meticulously logging the king's bowel movements. Surprisingly, this role was viewed as prestigious, providing the groom unique access to the monarch, a curious avenue to rise within court politics through a mastery of what one might call toilet diplomacy. Ironically, while Henry was fixated on control, meticulously managing his court, his image, his wives, and his heirs, the palaces he constructed as symbols of his authority were shot through with decay and the persistent smell of human waste. Even the gardens, designed to dazzle visiting dignitaries and rivals, were edged with moats that served as makeshift open sewers. Strolling through the rose gardens required a handkerchief clutched to one's nose and a resilient stomach. Perhaps this disarray serves as a fitting metaphor for Henry's reign, magnificent on the surface, yet decaying and fetid beneath. A king preoccupied with appearances at the cost of the empire's quiet, internal rot. The echoes of his obsession with refinement and modernity resonate even centuries later, whether expressed in grand architecture, international relations, or the simplest of plastic food containers. 31. Queen Elizabeth II's surprising choice, Tupperware. Amidst the splendor of diamonds and regal ceremonies, one of the most intriguing aspects of Queen Elizabeth II, who guided the monarchy through decades filled with turmoil and transformation, was her unwavering practicality. Even surrounded by opulence, she upheld a foundation of down-to-earth common sense, often humorously juxtaposed against her royal image. Nowhere was this contrast more striking than at the dinner table of Buckingham Palace, where her unexpected affinity for an everyday item, Tupperware, shone brightly. Yes, the Queen embraced these humble plastic containers. The notion of a monarch adorned with lavish jewels opting to store her meals in colorful, snap-lid bowls may seem far-fetched, yet numerous former royal chefs and aides have confirmed it to be true. Queen Elizabeth didn't merely accept Tupperware, she reportedly demanded it, especially at family gatherings or while at Balmoral Castle, her cherished retreat. According to royal chef Darren McGrady, who served her for over 10 years, casual meals often featured dishes served not on silverware, but from Tupperware, particularly during festive picnics or cozy evenings in front of the television. The Queen relished the simplicity, regarding food waste as far more disgraceful than using plastic containers. This wasn't a performance of humility, it was ingrained in her upbringing. Elizabeth spent her formative years during World War II, a time when rationing cultivated a sense of frugality. She learned the importance of utility and the practice of reusing and repurposing. Even as queen, she famously kept palace rooms cool to conserve energy, reused gift wrap, and recycled clothing from her wardrobe, even decades later. And Tupperware? It wasn't stowed away. Staff reported seeing her eagerly lifting lids for a meal. Guests, even aristocrats, were often taken aback to find they were sharing food from the same kind of containers typically seen at a neighborhood barbecue. There's something inherently British about this, the delightful irony of a queen, capable of dining from fine china, choosing a humble plastic bowl with a stubborn lid. This choice resonates beyond personal preference. It reflects the surreal contradictions of monarchy itself, the juxtaposition of wealth and thrift, the crown above the casserole. That peculiar scene of the Queen, spoon in one hand and Tupperware lid in the other, humanized her in ways that were impossible for public relations to achieve. It became one of those understated truths that didn't diminish Her Majesty, but rather lent it authenticity. In a realm where everything is meticulously polished and ceremonious, the most regal act of all might just be the rejection of performing royalty altogether. While Elizabeth's reign echoed with the sounds of refrigerators and plastic, her predecessor surrounded himself with a very different companion, a foul-mouthed parrot that shocked the court and lived longer than its king. In the regal halls of Buckingham Palace, amidst the imposing figure of King George V, known for his stern demeanour, love of naval attire, and a no-nonsense method of ruling, there resided an unanticipated companion, a parrot. This was no ordinary bird. Whispers among palace staff suggested that it possessed a remarkable vocabulary, enough to make any sailor cringe, and it was rumoured to converse in various tongues. The Sovereign of England and Emperor of India, it seemed, had taken a foul-mouthed polyglot under his wing. The origins of this parrot's presence remain a bit murky, yet most stories place its arrival in the king's years later in life during the roaring 1920s and early 1930s. Likely an African grey, known for their uncanny intellect and skilled mimicry, the bird soon became a notable character among the nobility, delighting and shocking guests alike with its unfiltered use of expletives and sharp insults, often sounding eerily like certain politicians. Whether the parrot had been deliberately trained or merely acquired its flashy language from palace staff is uncertain. Still, one can imagine the vibrant kitchen chatter providing ample lessons in colourful dialogue. George V himself reportedly found great amusement in the bird's antics, chuckling at its humorous interruptions during meetings and inappropriate comments over tea. His facade of stoic royalty cracked in private moments. One legendary, and perhaps embellished, anecdote recounts a diplomatic luncheon where, just as the French ambassador started to offer a toast, the parrot blurted out, "Not now, idiot." The ambassador simply blinked and resumed his speech while King George V was said to have nearly choked on his tea in laughter, an image of royal chaos amid the elegant veneer of diplomacy. This feathered jester became a minor legend within the palace. Although it was barred from official dinners, it roamed the royal study freely. Staff often found the parrot perched on thrones or muttering to itself in secluded corners, a curious creature described as the only one in the palace capable of speaking its mind. The fate of the parrot after King George V's passing in 1936 is uncertain. Some say it was gifted to a loyal footman, while others believe it was quietly retired, its destiny as obscure as the monarch's hidden whims. Perhaps the parrot represented more than mere companionship. Was it a rebellious spirit, a fragment of freedom for a king constrained by protocol? Yet, as all creatures eventually do, it fell silent. This brings us to an even deeper exploration of a realm that seems strange yet whimsically absurd, the world of royal nicknames, where even the mightiest figures in Britain exchanged endearing titles like Cabbage, Margot, and Old P. In the realm of royalty, where formality weaves an intricate tapestry, nicknames serve as the unexpected threads that unravel the grand illusion. Picture a monarchy crafted from marble and tradition, each royal announcement heralded by the blast of trumpets. Yet, with a mere utterance of light, the facade begins to tremble, a striking testament to the intrigue and charm encapsulated in royal family nicknames. Take Queen Elizabeth II, for instance. Cherished since her early days by the endearing Monica Light, a childhood mispronunciation of Elizabeth. This affectionate name, embraced by her family including her sister and Prince Philip, found its way onto the card from King Charles III at her funeral, signed in heartfelt memory simply as Lilith. Such an innocent name juxtaposed against her monumental title, the Queen of the United Kingdom and 15 other realms. Then we have Prince Philip, who could be called Old P or Darling by the Queen, while he referred to her, with a touch of mystery, as Cabbage. The origins of this curious term remain delightfully ambiguous. Some link it to the French phrase for my little cabbage, while others suggest it was a whimsical creation of Philip's imagination. Princess Margaret, known for her theatrical flair, playfully dubbed herself Margot within the family, delighting in her own mock pretentiousness. She would mimic herself in an exaggerated theatrical tone, saying, "Oh, Margot, darling," as if performing for an audience, a role she secretly relished. Even the now King Charles carried his own endearing quirks, addressing the Queen as Mummy well into adulthood, much to the chagrin of onlookers at public engagements. Meanwhile, his sons, William and Harry, had their own playful nicknames. William dubbed Wombat during a royal tour, and Harry affectionately known as Spike amongst friends, as he now navigates his dual identity of Duke of Sussex and California resident. Though seemingly trivial, these nicknames unveil a deeper truth. They reveal the emotional sanctuary within an institution steeped in stoicism. In a world where titles overshadow personal identity, such names become lifelines, reminding these public figures of their core roles as sons, wives, and sisters amidst the ceremonial weight. Ultimately, the British monarchy transcends mere political legacy. It embodies a complex, often absurd family dynamic, rich with myth and genuine humanity. And perhaps, therein lies the most captivating and enigmatic essence of it all.